Found a pretty big snake. Not a rattlesnake. There we go, that's a better color. This is the good one. We don't want to mess with it. They can take out a rattlesnake, so. Okay, I'll admit this doesn't look like much. I'll show you some details in a bit. This time last year, actually I was already on the road on the bicycle tour. But I remember the last month or two frantically trying to finish everything, and it got to the point I just left a bunch of piles all over the workbench, and I looked at it a few times and I was like, man, the biggest problem is I needed someplace to store the tools. And I was like, well, what I really wanted to do was go spend about $300 on a proper toolbox. If I could have got the top and bottom, that would have been pretty cool, but that would have been more. I do have time. What's the other option, right? So I was looking at what I'd started last year, year before. I had done some of this. I got a couple strips of French Cleat here. And some of these things, like, for instance, this, where the speakers are, I actually put a French Cleat on the outside of the house, and there's a wire run outside so I can take the speakers, take them outside, just clip them onto the wall, and that can go anywhere. So that's been started for a while, and so over the last week I just figured, you know what, let me just do this an hour a day until it gets done. These overhead shelves, I had taken the 2x4s when I built the house. I took the 2x4s. I had a bunch of these little short scraps from, I think from making the roof trusses. So I had a bunch of short pieces. So I just, with the air nailer, shot nails from this into the stud, and I did every stud. And that gave me a nice solid shelf. Things like crescent wrenches, I just hung up on nails. And then where the regular combination wrenches are, that's actually I think what they're called. So I've got metric on this side, imperial on this side. I just screwed a short piece of 2x4 right to the studs and put a screw for every one. Now I don't know if it shows up or not, but I've got multiples of some sizes. So if I had more than one of that size, I put a longer screw in and I could stack them up. So like on my metrics, these I bought when I was working as a mechanic. So I ended up with one set for work and one set for in my truck, I think. So I got some of the gear wrench, ratcheting, box end wrenches and stuff like that. So I've got multiples of some of the sizes, but not all the sizes. And then we moved down a little bit, and I did the same with the screwdrivers. 2x4 screwed to the studs, and then a small piece of OSB, and I just drilled a bunch of holes. I went 3 deep and all the way across. And it's not super convenient, but I don't use a lot of screwdrivers very often. So I started sort of doing them in order, and then I kept finding more here and there. So they're not perfect right now, but it kind of goes, so it goes straight slot, Torx, Phillips, and then I got some cheaper ones down on the other end. I didn't catch this fast enough. Some of these screwdrivers were just long enough, I couldn't get them in up here. So I was looking around, and I'm like, well, I had one piece that's this big. I had only put the punches and chisels on that end, and I hadn't done anything on this end. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with these guys? I was going to try to make some kind of a clever holder. Then I'm like, you know what? If I took this is a piece of a 2x6 that was already cut to length for a scrap. So I've got your metric and imperial ball-ended hex wrenches, and then this monstrosity I actually found on the side of the road. It's a Torx with a security bit, no less. I'm not sure if it says what size it is. It's bigger than Torx 30, maybe 45, something like that. So these guys, I just have them sitting on the shelf like that. Gives me lots of room. Actually, the red one I use more on the bike. So I was breaking a lot of bits when I was welding and making stuff, so I started buying bits in a package of the same size. So these are 1/8 inch. I think there was 10 or 12 to a pack. So you just buy a bunch of the ones you use all the time, because you know you get your nice index of 40 bits and you break one and you're like, well, that's the one you needed. Some of these are here before. So the set of hole saws, I just stacked them and another 2x4, and then they sit there together. These magnet strips, not the world's strongest magnet, but they actually work pretty good for picking up oddball stuff that you don't know what else to do with it. So like everything you buy comes with a hex wrench. A couple other obvious issues. I try not to do this too much, but I use the clamps more often than I use the screwdrivers. I put the clamps up where they're easy to get to, and it's just like, okay, these ones I just hang, and so far they stay. My favorite yellow DeWalt's, these are really handy. It's a one-handed clamp if you haven't seen them. When you're working by yourself, everything is one-handed. Speed squares are always something that are hard to find a spot for, so I just put a couple screws in, and I got the little one and the big one. Basically good enough. Funny thing was, I don't use this very much anymore, but skateboard wrench actually ends up being the right size for a lot of the battery terminals. So between these two, it's usually right. That one, not so much. The new batteries I got are metric studs, so that doesn't work anymore. So I'll put that where I can find it. Something I've heard said a bunch of different ways, but when you're doing something like this, try not to be too cute. And it's like as soon as you drill exactly enough holes, you'll turn around and find one more screwdriver. So go ahead and just drill extras, unless you just think you're never going to buy something new anymore, right? Or leave room for expansion. The idea of a French cleat. Here's a piece. It's got, I think it's a 45 cut. You take one, and then you take the other one, and you drop it in. So, like for instance, on this wall, this is like this, and so if I take this and set it in there, it'll grip pretty good. Okay. So I would take a strip of this and then mount it to the back of, you know, some random piece of wood, like that, such that it's got an open edge. And then when you put it up here, it just grabs. Okay, that's not the most amazing thing in the world, but it is super handy. So if you build a wall that's got the French cleats, anything that's up here, you know, like I said with the speaker, I can pick this up, find another spot, and it just stays there. I don't even have to grab it. It's just one-handed, pick it up and move it. Okay, so if I decided I wanted some more room somewhere else, and I can pick it up, just make sure it's on there, and it's super secure. That's, you know, it's one of the simplest things I've ever seen. It's like, wow, my mind was blown the first time I saw that. Okay, so come up with a system like that that's a little bit flexible. And these are really easy to make. A lot of it is just scraps or little, you know, I used OSB. You know, if you're going to make it nice, you can make them out of plywood or actually take like a 1x4 for the cleats. That makes it nice. These are really pretty strong though. A couple years back when I was growing a garden, I'd made these planter boxes. And I think it's a foot deep, probably 4 feet by, I don't know, let's look. Yeah, foot deep. I know they're 4 feet long. Yeah, 2 feet. So 1 by 2 by 4 feet. Okay. Common dimensions. All that means is you don't have any waste when you rip up a sheet of 4x8 plywood or OSB or whatever. So these are all pretty battle damaged. They were out in the sun for a year, and I watered them a lot, and you know, that kind of stuff. Well, I wasn't going to use them anymore. I thought, well, I put a bunch of them in the bus for quite a while. I think I had 6 or 7 of these. And so I've got 2 in here, one on the opposite wall. And I thought about it, I was like, okay, that's halfway to a shelf, because you got the top of it. You know, you can put all the stuff up there. The box is movable, so if I decide I don't like it, I just take it off. This is sitting on top of the workbench. All right. Ended up, it kind of was blocking the plug-in over here, or there. So I just cut a notch out of it. Didn't take a lot of time, just ripped it real quick. So what I was doing, I got this from the internet. I think it was Blondie Hacks. She does some machining kind of stuff. So what she was showing was, if you got a bunch of pliers, they take up a lot of room. So we'll just grab a couple of these. All right. They always, like, if these are in your in your toolbox, if you set them like this, that's only 2 and 6 inches or something like that. If you put them on edge, they're less than an inch thick. So you can just stack a bunch of them. Okay. So I was looking at that. I'm like, okay, how can I make that work for me? What I came up with, I didn't feel like moving the workbench. I could have taken little blocks of wood. I cut these earlier for another project. I basically just took a 2x4 and resawed it on the table saw. I think this weighs 1.5 inches, so I took the board on edge and just ran it through the table saw. I made a bunch of little ones. I've used this for a few things. Anyway, so I was thinking I could put these here as like a divider, but I really would have to drill it from the bottom and run the screws from the other side, and I already had everything else on here, so I didn't want to do that. That would have worked though. So what I came up with, I've got a bunch of these brackets. You buy them in a 4-foot piece or whatever. There's a name for it, I can't remember. It's not unistrut, but it's wall bracket something something. I forget what you even call it. You get them at the hardware store though. So I just cut them into, I used the holes that were there, and I just cut them on every 3rd hole or whatever. And then when you take your handful of vice grips, let's see if we can do these in order this time. So I just stand them on edge, and they kind of lean up against the divider. You might be wondering why I've got so many vice grips. Most of these I found on the road. It's one of the coolest things about riding a bicycle. You're going slow enough that when you see somebody's tools, they rattled out of the back of the truck, you can pick them up and off you go. That's one of the reasons I had so much trouble on the bike trip. I kept stopping for stuff because it was shiny and you'd see it, you're like, ooh, got to get that. I have bought some of these. But anyway, if you need vice grips, quite often I need more than one at a time. Like, I used these a lot for welding, for just quick clamps to hold little things together or whatever. So you'd get a couple of them and clip them on there. And so just every about 6 inches I put another divider. And some of these are tools I use all the time, and I kind of recognize them. So I know that the blue handles are my pipe cutters. That's good for cutting flex pipes and garden hoses and stuff like that. Sometimes I cut some of the bushes if I got a trail, like for biking. I use that to trim the bushes. Here's my aviation snips, put 3 of them together. I think that's network cable crimper. Yeah, RJ45 and stuff. I think David gave me that. I haven't had one of those in years, so thanks, David. Yeah, it just kind of goes all the way across. So all of the channel locks on that side, and then I've got regular pliers, and then kind of oddball specialty stuff that you use once a year, but it's nice to have it. And then there was some more of the oddball stuff that you didn't really know what to do with, so that just goes in a box. Okay, so I've got a bunch of screwdriver bits, and then a few leftover screwdrivers, like the jeweler's drivers. I don't use very much, but I know they're up there. All right. The hammers were up there. I got a couple putty knives and stuff like that. My Dremel stuff, a nail puller. I've been using that a lot lately. It's kind of one of those things, I got it kind of close to the hammer, I know where it is, and this is, to me, the biggest thing. If I have a place to put things, and that's been the hardest thing for me for the last 5 years since I came out here. I'm used to having a good toolbox. I used to work as a mechanic. So I get out here and I don't have a place to put things, and so it ended up, it just was like 2 feet deep all the way across the workbench, and you couldn't find anything. So another one, like knives, utility knives and stuff like that. Yeah, it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but I'm looking forward to this because, for one thing, this workbench was so covered I couldn't use it. There's still a little bit I got to work through here, and it's just, I kind of worked it every day for an hour or two, and I thought, okay, if I can just do that every day for a week, I'll be done. So now I'm down to the little stuff that you don't know what to do with, kind of thing. It was so chaotic, I didn't know where anything was, and I wasted so much time looking for stuff. So I thought, hey, let me just fix this once. There's a lot better examples of this on the internet, but there's a lot of tools that if you just spend a little bit of time holding them, and that's kind of what I was doing. I was like, okay, how would I like to mount this? Okay, it'll hang, or some things don't hang. You know, this was one of the ones. You know, I kept looking around. How am I going to do that? I'm like, you know what? If I just put it on a shelf, that works fine. Okay, do that. A lot of things like pliers will kind of hang if they're on something, but like these don't. They tend to just fall over. But sometimes the handle is heavy enough to hold it in place. So one of the things I was looking at, I could put a pipe across and just hang them all on the pipe. That would have been pretty easy. So I've got 2 bikes hanging from the wall. I got a couple 6-packs of your basic bicycle hook. You know, there's for scale. That's made to fit on a tire. Like so. So there's one on there, and I've got 2 bikes stacked up like that. Something that took me a few seconds to get my head around. The electric bike with the motor has enough weight that it throws the balance off. The bike behind it is just a regular push bike or pedal bike or whatever, no motor. It hangs just fine, but this one, with the extra weight of the motor, you know, I don't even have the batteries on there, it kept wanting to tip over. So I took a bungee strap and just tied it from the frame up to the wheel, and that keeps it pretty stable. But otherwise, yeah, I'd get about 2 steps away from it and it would just try to roll over on you. I don't know if it would actually fall down, but it sure didn't want to stay there. So I got that figured out. There's the other planter box in the background. That's just a good example. It's real easy to work with it like that. I don't think you would take the time to build a box like that just for that, but since I had it, that worked out really good. A lot of the bike stuff is over there, and then coming around the other side, I've got the bike batteries and charger are stored here, but when I get back from a ride, I usually charge the batteries up by my desk in the front. I just want to be there. I don't like to charge a battery where you just walk away from it. That makes me nervous. They almost never catch on fire or explode, but if I was sitting next to it, I would notice it happening, and hopefully I'd have enough time to unplug the charger. It might still explode, but I'd rather be close to it when it happened than it happening back here and the whole house is on fire before I knew about it. And then the last shelf, this is like the only real shelf in here. I made that a few years back. OSB shelves, and then you can kind of see I ripped 2x4s down to 2x2s and used that to reinforce the shelves. And then I screwed through the 2x4 legs into the 2x2, and that makes it a pretty solid shelf. The way I look at something like this, I hope it doesn't come across as bragging about all the stuff I've got. It's more a matter of how much stuff can you store in a small space and still be able to find it. So hopefully you saw some ideas here that you can make use of. It just became a pain point where it was so hard for me to find tools and so hard to put them away. I just got to the point I didn't even want to mess with stuff for a while. Like Doug would say on SV Seeker, all right, get up off the couch, go out and make something on your own. Don't just sit around watching other people make stuff. All right, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you got some useful ideas there. I've not been talking about this very much lately, but my main source of income has been these YouTube videos. The actual money I make from the ads is quite small. What actually keeps me going is a few people that are helping me out over on Patreon or YouTube members. Just a few bucks every month would sure make a huge difference. So if you get anything out of my content, there's a link down below, or I'll put it up on screen. You can help me out through Patreon, which is a monthly subscription. You can also do YouTube members, or you can just throw me a buck on PayPal once in a while. It all helps. Thank you very much. Bye for now.